first let's discuss what numbers we have listed here.
Yeah, so what we've put in here is there are 3 stakes that are a little bit over 10 million hex. And so they're probably the highest value in terms of hex, obviously. So we're going to look at how you can value those in terms of Hedron. There's basically 2 kind of values. One is the value of sending it to the ICOSA contract and how much ICOSA you get for that. And the other value will be what that stake would be if you tried to replicate it today. And so in between those 2 prices is probably a kind of fair value price for these stakes.
Yeah. So this one here, this was we threw in some basically some rough numbers, right? Just to kind of get an idea. So Bluey had found a few HSIs that went to auction that were 10 million plus hex, right? So on this spreadsheet, we're going to use this spreadsheet to kind of break down how we would look at the value of the HSIs. So for starters, we plugged in 10 million hex in here, and then we guesstimated how many B shares that gave this person. So it came out to 1.2 million B shares, which would be like what is that? 12,000 T shares? Is that about right?
That's right. Yes.
Okay, and then. So there's a couple things we looked at here. So once you get that information, the only other piece of information you need to know is what the current hex T share rate is. So if we start here, let's just start with the hex tokens. What we kind of figured out just by playing with the numbers is this particular hex stake was created the day ICOSA launched. It was created as an HSI and sold to the contract immediately. And we know that because the tokens that have accrued over time by looking at the HSI Watch website matches the fact that it would be at a 90-day mature rate as far as the yield goes. So that being said, we could look at the current price, and I know that the hex price actually pumped a little bit in the last hour or so. So this is going to be a little bit off. But at the 3.2 cents, that puts the value of the hex inside the HSI at the time of auction, not today, but at the time of auction, would be $337,000 worth of hex in there. So in the way we got that is we've got a variable that shows how many days has that stake been served so far. So there's a couple pretty complicated formulas in here. If you can see these formulas up top here, maybe screenshot this or do whatever you can. If you're trying to reproduce this spreadsheet at home, these are the formulas you'll need up here. So essentially, this is your longer pays better and your bigger pays better formulas, which the bigger pays better formula is quite complex, actually. So that will dictate how much hex price you're actually going to get or how much hex yield you'll get. Oh, see, now I screwed up my. There we go.
And for the people just joined too, because a bunch of people just joined. Can you just go over again what the spreadsheet is and what we're looking at?
So what we're looking at is essentially me breaking my spreadsheet. Lovely. I'm gonna have to fix that.
Yeah, you fix that. I'll explain to people. Basically, we're just looking at how to value these HSIs that have been sent to the ICOSA contract. Because they were obviously they were borrowed against when they entered the ICOSA contract, and so a lot of them will start. Well, they'll all start coming out from November 13 onwards, and so we're just looking at how you can value them. So you've got how much hex is actually in there, then you've got how much Hedron you could mint at that current day. Then you also have, which is not probably reflected in the price, how much future Hedron it will mint. And that's probably something that you want to consider, especially with like those ones with, these launch bonuses. Obviously, you're going to get a lot more Hedron from those launch bonuses. So there'll be a little bit of, future price, let's say, because you're getting so much more Hedron from those. And so you ready to give?
Yeah, so I got that sheet fixed. So it basically at that 90-day mark, it will have earned 555,000 hex tokens. Just in yield so far, just with those days served. So the reason why this is important is because this will help dictate what the value of the stake of that HSI is at that particular point in time. Because I believe that particular point in time, when you decide to put in funds to actually bid on these HSIs, it's good to know what that HSI is worth exactly then, like a screenshot, like a point in time where you can point and say, hey, this was worth this much, and I spent this much to put a bid out for it, right? So
now the nice thing let's get to the alpha. The nice thing about this spreadsheet is that you can adjust the Hedron price and the hex price. So let's say, for argument's sake, that the hex price does a 2x or drops a 0, let's say. And then, so if we put in the Hedron price as 0.40 and a 1, what does that change? How does that change the value of the stake?
Oh, okay. We won't look at that. Well, let's point out one thing. I know, guys, this is a really complicated spreadsheet, and so it's probably really hard to follow along. But just bear with us here. So let's talk about this real quick, Bluey, just so we can get this part down. So essentially, this total value in Hedron, all this is doing is it's taking that snapshot in time of what that HSI is worth, and it's dividing that by the current Hedron price. Okay. And that will give you the total amount of Hedron. So if you took this amount of Hedron, and you times it by the current Hedron price, that would equal the value of the stake, right? So that's what we said is the fair value. Fair value equals mintable Hedron, which is very little, just a little bit in the grand scheme of things. It doesn't really factor in all that much currently, but down the road it will. The hex that's staked in there and the principal, right? So you add the value of the Hedron plus the value of the hex, you get the actual value of that stake. Okay, so that is a direct reflection to the total amount of Hedron that would be used to purchase that HSI off auction at the fair value mark. Okay, so that being said, this fair value mark of that amount of Hedron can fluctuate. And the two things that makes it fluctuate is the price of hex and the price of Hedron. Okay. And it's going to act as kind of like a seesaw effect, depending on which price outpaces the other, like which token outpaces the other in price. So, for example, let's say that Hedron's been gaining domination over hex, right? Over the last, since the auction started. So 90 days, maybe more, right? Right around 90 days, probably. So that's when Hedron started to pump and started to gain some dominance over hex. Like that trading ratio of hex to Hedron was gaining in the Hedron favor, right? So if that continues to happen, and let's say we see a pump just before auction and we lose another 0. We lose another 0 in the Hedron price. Right now it's 5 zeros in a 4-ish. Let's drop that down, and let's say it drops a 0, and now it's only 4 zeros in a 4. All right. Do we see what just happened there? Now the value of Hedron jumped up, but the most important thing is that you lost about 90% of the amount of Hedron it would take to equal the fair value of that HSI. So that equals a lot less Hedron burnt, right? A lot less, 90% less. And that's assuming the hex price stays the same. So watch, I'm going to switch it right back again. I'm going to add that 0 back in. Now we're back up to the 81 billion. So it dropped from 81 billion to 8 billion in order to win that bid. Okay. So now let's look at the inverse. Let's say this is the kind of the local Hedron top, and Hedron goes down and hex is going up, running into the auction day. Or let's just assume Hedron stays the same price.
Yeah, let's say this Hedron stays the same and we'll double the price of hex.
Let's take it to 10 cents. Okay? So let's say hex goes up to 10 cents. Now let's watch that value. Total value in Hedron right now, it's 81 billion. Let's throw the hex price at 10 cents.
That's 1 cent you've got, isn't it?
Whoops. There you go. So now, if the hex price is 10 cents and the Hedron price is the same price as it is today, now you're looking at 254 billion Hedron. that will be needed in order to reach fair market value for that HSI. You see how that jumped up there? Are you following that, Max?
Yeah. No, I just had a question too, just to zoom. Could you zoom in on just a couple spots in there, and can you like zoom and then pan over just so people watching too can see all the titles? Because I'm struggling to see a couple of the titles too, so that would be helpful.
So the point of that is, as if it's doing that, the point of that is that if you're a Hedron/Hex whale and you're thinking, how do I benefit the most out of this? When we saw, for instance, with the sacrifices for Pulse and PulseX, we saw the Hex price pump so that those people could sacrifice their Hex and get more of a US dollar value. Now, if you're a Hex Hedron whale looking at this situation, instead of pumping the Hedron price, you might be a lot smarter to pump the Hex price, because that drastically increases the value of each HSI. And that means that they'll be a lot more expensive if Hedron stays at the same price in terms of Hedron. So instead of 81 billion Hedron being burnt for that stake, 254 billion. I mean, that was a triple of the price in Hex, but even if generally speaking, if the Hex price pumps in relation to Hedron price, there's going to be a ton more Hedron that ends up getting burnt. That means burnt from supply. And it also means pumping those pools, the ICOSA, Hedron, and WATSA pools, because the amount of Hedron burnt each day is the nominator. And then when you divide it by the share rate, you'll get the amount that's given to those pools. So the play for a Hex whale is not to pump Hedron. It's to pump Hex here.
Wow. Okay. How does this play into the auctions too, just as far as, does that mean so if the Hex whale's best, or the Hedron whale's best chance is to pump Hex, could we see a Hex pump going into the auctions?
That's what I'm kind of thinking.